Hello, it's day 5 of celebrating becoming Heather. If you watched day 4, my mom wanted me to apologize for the abrupt ending. Today we're reading from chapter 22. The cold rushed in at Heather when she opened the door. With a shiver, she stepped out into it. She wanted to experience winter to the fullest while she could. The sun above her was shining down from a blue sky, but its rays did little to warm the chilly air. Her coat was thick, but she still felt cold. She could see her breath freezing, and her nose felt like an icicle, yet she enjoyed it all. It was familiar and brought back fond memories. She wished she could share it with the Scarletts. Poor Olivia had never known a winter's cold, nor had Rose. She was not even certain they understood what cold was. Thinking about them brought a smile to her face. How she missed them. She wrapped her arms around herself and wished for a hot cup of coffee. She had never been a coffee drinker before going to the island. Her mother would be shocked at her request when she got home. Heather had preferred hot chocolate all of her life. A dog yipped from the other side of a nearby fence and startled Heather. It was a toy poodle with a typical poodle haircut. It ran back and forth along a well-worn path next to the fence, letting out a series of unpleasant noises, which were as close to a bark as the poor thing could manage. "Starlight!" yelled an unhappy voice from behind the house. The dog let out 2 more grating yips and then turned and hurried away. A moment later, a woman approached the fence holding the dog. She was at least 10 years older than Heather and was not dressed for the weather, other than wearing a coat which she had not bothered to zip. Heather knew this woman well. Her name was Shannon Stowe. She and her husband had lived down the street from the Sailors for several years. "Laura," she said, catching sight of her neighbor, "I didn't realize you were home." Heather crossed the Stowe's lawn to speak with her. "I just got back on Saturday. Are you here for the holidays?" "Yes, my boss gave me a little over 2 weeks off." "How nice! Do you want to come in?" Shannon invited. "It's cold out here. I've got a pot of coffee inside, or there's hot chocolate." "Sure," Heather agreed. "I'd love some coffee." She followed her neighbor into her kitchen, where Carl Stowe was sitting at the breakfast table reading the newspaper. "Laura's home," his wife told him as they entered the room. He put his newspaper down and shook her hand. "It's good to see you, Laura. How's the Pacific?" "Warm," she told him. "Everything is green on the island." "Why'd you bother coming home? This weather is nasty." "Yes, but I missed it." "You always were a strange kid. Have some coffee," he offered. Heather sat down and poured herself a mug. "When did you get the dog?" she asked. Shannon leaned against the kitchen counter and stroked the poodle as she answered. "A couple of weeks ago. My cousin is moving into an apartment and she needed to get rid of her." "She can have her back for all I care," grumbled Carl. "She is kind of annoying, but the kids like her," Shannon said. Heather remembered the Stowe children. She had babysat them a few times before going to college. There were 2 of them, Josh and Candace. "Where are the kids?" she asked. "They're still in bed," Shannon answered. "They don't usually wake up until 7:30. "What are you doing up so early? I didn't think you were a morning person." Heather glanced at the clock and noticed that it was just after 7. "I've picked up some new habits on the island," she said. "We get up pretty early out there." "What's it like on the island?" Shannon asked, and Heather began a thorough description. She sat and talked to her neighbors until their children woke up. Then she left the little family to their Monday morning routine and returned home. It was only a few blocks back to her parents' house. She waved and greeted several more neighbors along the way. It was refreshing to be home among these people she had known for so long. She may never have said a word to half of them, but she knew their names and a portion of their history. There was something satisfying about coming home to her small town. The wind rushed toward her and she flinched at its cold touch. The warmth of her house and some of her mother's egg casserole sounded good. She hurried her step and did not stop until she was through the front door. After hanging her coat, she stepped into the kitchen where her mother was slicing bread. "There you are," Mrs. Saylor greeted her. "I was wondering where you were." "I stopped at the Stowes," Heather explained. "They invited me in." "Oh, good. Shannon was asking about you the other day. She wondered if you were going to be home to sing in their caroling group." "Oh, she didn't even mention that." "She probably forgot. You could talk to her about it at church." "Good idea. I love caroling." After breakfast, Heather returned to her room with a book. It seemed but a moment later that the doorbell rang. Heather glanced up at her clock and saw that 2 hours had passed. Curious as to who might be visiting, she closed her book and strolled into the living room. The doorbell rang again as she approached the door, and she wondered where her mother was. With a shrug, she opened the door. Elias Kaufman stood on the porch holding a toolbox and shivering in the cold. "Hello, come in," she told him, opening the door wide enough for him to enter. "Hello," he chattered with a grin as she closed the door behind him. "It's chilly out this morning." "I know, I went out walking earlier and almost froze my nose off. You can hang your coat on the hooks. I'll get you some coffee if you'd like." "Sounds great," he agreed. He pulled off his coat and, rubbing his hands together, followed her into the kitchen. Mr. Sailor had started a fire in the wood stove earlier that morning, and the room was cozy with the warmth radiating from it. Elias walked over and held his hands in the air above the stove. "So how have you been?" he asked with interest. "I've been good. I love my job. How about you?" "I'm good, really good. I love my job too, despite all the overtime I've been working." "You've done a marvelous job in this kitchen," Heather remarked as she grabbed a mug for him. "Thank you. It's been fun working for your parents. It wasn't the same without you around, though. You've been missed." Her heart warmed at his words. "I know. It's been too long since I've seen you. I didn't even realize you were in the remodeling business until Mom told me." She poured him some coffee and handed it to him. "Well, how long will you be here?" he asked, sipping the hot drink. "I go home a few days after Christmas. Maybe I'll see you a time or two then." Mrs. Sailor entered the room through the back door, dressed for the cold. "Elias," she greeted their guest, "it's good to see you. How's your mom?" "She's doing better, thank you. Her cold is going away, but I think my dad caught it." "Oh, that's too bad," Mrs. Sailor said, pulling off her extra clothing. "Do you have any elderberry juice? It's great for the immune system." "I don't know. I'll suggest that to Mom." He downed the last of his coffee and set the mug on the table. "Well, I'd better get to work." He exited through the living room and left the ladies alone. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.